Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. Okay, guys, the next one again from Kira, thank you. German political parties explained. My name's Connor. If you're new, guys, I am from Rhode Island, New England, USA, in that order. Yeah, I like to learn things. Let's go, shall we? German political parties explained. Preemptive like. Original link to the video from Lucas Bender. I'll give him a sub. Top of the description, Discord below that. Would love to have you. Let's go.
Who are they? The political parties in Germany. Who are they?
I'm gonna have some questions. It's just a matter of time. I'd appreciate any answers, guys. Really do appreciate it.
The political parties in Germany. Who are they? What do they do? And what do people think of them? Well, let's find out. So until there are dozens of parties in Germany, but for national politics we can focus on just 6. 7 if you're a pedantic know-it-all. And how do we know these 6 are the important ones? Well, they're the only ones with seats in the national parliament. The other ones are either too small to get in or too regional to matter. I'm sorry, Magdeburger Gartenpartei? We're here for the big guys. Just
Magdeburger Gartenpartei?
like most democracies on this planet,
Yeah, I'll
German
react to
politics
that.
were once
That
dominated
was my
by...
other video, guys. Sorry.
We're here for the big guys. Just like most democracies on this planet, German politics were once dominated by 2 major parties, one of the broad, more progressive center-left and one of the broad, more conservative center-right. But as we shall see, the whole power dynamic has changed quite a bit, especially in recent years when minor parties have become much more relevant and powerful. There will be time codes for all of these, but for now let's start with
Die Sozialdemokratische Partei Deutschlands SPD.
This is the
Die Sozialdemokratische Partei Deutschlands
Die Sozialdemokratische Partei Deutschlands.
SPD.
This is the supposedly big party of the center-left. It's the oldest party in Germany, emerging from socialist movements of the 1860s before moderating into what it is today. If you're familiar with any of the many Labour parties around the world, like the UK one or the New Zealand one or the Dutch Partij van de Arbeid, you probably have a good idea of the SPD's basic profile, which is being the party of solidarity. A kind of solidarity that's expressed by a strong welfare state focusing on the working class as well as overall social and economic justice. Accordingly, their main focus has always been on the blue-collar worker, you know, your coal miner, metal worker, cleaner, hands-on kind of jobs. But these days they're really struggling to keep that aura of the grand old workers' party alive. You might be getting different explanations for why that is, depending on if you're talking to a more left-wing social democrat or a more pragmatic moderate. Those 2 wings of the party tend to clash from time to time. But either way, just know that the SPD was the big left party for decades. On to their right-wing rival.
Die Christlich-Demokratische Union, CDU.
The CDU is a juggernaut in German politics. Most of our chancellors have been CDU, which makes them the sort of default power party, but just like the
My back of my freaking ear almost got like torn off. I was checking for blood. Sorry, there is none. Sorry to gross you out there. Why do I talk? What was I gonna say? Oh yeah.
Yes, chancellors have been CDU.
I don't really think of Germany as a very religious country, and there isn't even at least like in name, a Christian party in the U.S. Maybe you could say Republican, but so that's a little that's interesting.
Which makes them the sort of default power party, but just like the SPD, their shine's starting to wear off a little. When foreigners hear the name Christian Democratic Union, they often think that it's a sort of hardline religious group, which, let me be clear, it's definitely not. No, they're just sort of culturally Christian, right? So moderately conservative, sort of the more regressive, cautious force, in line with many of the right-wing parties across the continent. Traditionally, they're made up of social Christians, economic liberals, and conservatives. And no, I didn't just come up with these categories. No, the party quite ostentatiously advertises with these 3 pillars of the union. But you won't be wrong just calling them the Conservative Party of Germany. As such, they're most concerned with things like public safety, tradition, frugal spending, things...
Sorry, did he say that Angela Merkel was in the Conservative Party?
And no more regret is a juggernaut in German politics. Most of our chancellors have been CDU, which makes them the sort of default juggernaut in German politics. Most of our chancellors have been...
Angela Merkel was a conservative? What are what are
CDU, which meant to facilitate their methods of the union, concerned with things like public safety, tradition, frugal spending, things like that. Oh, and overall they're quite moderate, which has won them many elections, but just like with the SPD, there's a growing desire from the more ideological wing of the party to become more unapologetically conservative.
guys, the shock of maybe less so in Eastern European countries, maybe in Poland and Hungary and maybe even Austria or something like that. I wouldn't call Austria, but the such a stark difference is that the political spectrum in I'm gonna break out the whiteboard here. Okay, the whiteboard wasn't working, so Microsoft Paint will do. But this will be really quick. So just you have the center, the right, the left. This will be the U.S. This will be Europe, right? One of the very obvious things is that a right-leaning or kind of center-right political, maybe not in the Eastern Europe, but definitely Western Europe, you're more center, if not kind of left-leaning in the U.S. It just seems like the conservative part of the EU, like that's like where the right starts. And this would be like all of the left-wing party. If that means, does that make any sense? I hope it did somehow. Anyways, let's get back.
Conservative again. Okay, so far so easy, right? Two parties stood along the standard Western left-right divide. And the thing is, we would have almost been stuck with that two-party system if it weren't for
Die Freie Demokratische Partei, FDP.
Yeah, this little guy has always managed to squeeze in. The word free should have already given away what the Free Democrats stand for. Freedom. Or if you want to be fancy, we could also call it liberalism. How exactly that freedom is defined may vary between the different factions of the party. You know, you've got your social liberals, economic liberals, and national liberals, which is what we call the sort of right-wing libertarian kind of liberal. But really, these differences are minuscule. The important bit is they all agree that the individual should be at the center of all policy. That makes them both very open and progressive in a kind of we shouldn't tell other people how to live stance, as well as very capitalist. So they're all about lower taxes, decreasing bureaucracy, and competition. If you are into that sort of politics, chances are that you're from a sort of upper middle class to upper class household. Maybe you're a big shot business person or self-employed, or you founded one of these trendy hipster startups. Or at least that's the sort of person that usually votes for the FDP. Well, that and farmers. Now, I already mentioned that the FDP was sort of the reason we didn't end up with a two-party system, and I mean that quite literally. There were a few decades when we only had three parties in parliament, the two big ones and then the FDP as the small third option. But don't think small equals unimportant. No, that was actually a really comfortable situation for the FDP to be in, because they alone could choose who would rule the country. I mean, obviously not alone, but the success of the FDP always made it so that neither of the big parties could get an outright majority. And that's how the Liberals earned the rather unflattering title of the Kingmaker, who's only there to break the tie. But these days they're really trying to get away from that image by highlighting their tech savviness, for example.
Bündnis 90, die Grünen.
Next up are the Greens, who came in much later, like we're talking the 1980s here. The Greens are actually quite different from all of the other parties, since they grew out of these protest movements from the late 60s to the late 70s, who advocated for all sorts of issues like women's rights, anti-war, anti-nuclear power, and obviously environmentalism. And they kept that revolutionary spirit going even after they upgraded to a proper party. Like,
isn't nuclear power? I thought nuclear power, as long as you, obviously there's the waste problem, right? And if you are competent with them and you're in a earthquake prone area like Japan, Fukushima, or if you're just negligent like with Chernobyl, it just seems like nuclear is the best way to go for the environment, and yet the Green Party doesn't like it. Let me know if I'm wrong.
Look at them. Look how uncomfortable he is.
Hippies.
All those high-class politicians suddenly sitting next to literal hippies knitting in parliament. Now, obviously the old parties weren't happy with those green weirdos. I bet they don't even shower, they'd say. But then came a time in which the Liberals firmly placed themselves at the right hand of the Conservatives. Suddenly the Labour Party was without a partner.
Oh, now let's be friends.
I think you can see where this is going. Hey, psst, hey, green guy. I didn't mean what I said about you and not showering.
Give me your votes.
You actually smell quite nice. And thus came to be what's been considered kind of the natural state of German politics ever since, a red-green alliance as counterweight against a liberal-conservative one. Since then, the Greens have undergone a sometimes messy evolution with lots of infighting between their more left fundamentalist wing called the Fundis and their more moderate, sometimes even conservative wing, the Realos.
So it's like the Bernies versus the Clintons.
However, that division seems to disappear a little since the Greens have grown so much in the recent years. Like, they've become massively popular, at least for the time being. They're still a very explicitly feminist party and fairly interventionist economically, but they try to soften the edges a bit to seem more appealing to a wider audience. It's 1989. David Hasselhoff has just torn down the wall. East and West will finally reunite. What a major historical event. You'd expect the end of the Cold War to be a pretty big political earthquake, wouldn't you? One that's surely gonna leave its mark on the German party system. But remarkably, it wasn't. The few parties that did emerge from the New East...
I'm curious where the East Berliners... where the Eastern Germans fell, what parties they fell into.
Were quickly sucked up by their already... It wasn't. The few parties that did emerge from the New East were quickly sucked up by their already existing Western counterparts. Just like basically everything about the East. The only exception is Die Linke, which is the Eastern Party. So you might already be aware that East Germany was a dictatorship for 40 years. It was ruled in this very repressive way by one single party, the Socialist Unity Party, or SED. But here's the thing, when the wall fell and East Germany finally got some proper democracy, that party was not outlawed. No, it got to continue in the United Germany, but now reduced from a singular, unopposed regime to just one of many contenders in the democratic process. One with minimal success. Turns out having led a dictatorship doesn't actually sound good on your resume. So in order to rebrand itself, the SED quickly changed its name to PDS, the Party of Democratic Socialism. The old Western parties were of course very much opposed to this new party, like even more so than against the Greens. But by this time the PDS had already assumed a new role. That of the niche interest party for Eastern Germans. Turns out many people from the East were nostalgic, or at least sympathetic to the SED. So even though the Eastern Bloc had collapsed...
Stockholm Syndrome.
Nostalgic, or at least sympathetic...
No, I don't want to make... You know, I will never get offended, okay, by what political party you're in, unless it's like... I mean, don't go crazy. But people should believe what they want to believe, you know.
To the SED. So even though the Eastern Bloc had collapsed, socialism was very much still on the table. A little detour. What's the difference between socialism and social democracy?
Ooh, pick me. I believe socialism, I might be wrong here, in Marx's definition, was is a government striving towards communism. I believe that's what Karl Marx's idea of it was. So like transitioning from whatever political system to communism, which I guess has never been achieved. I guess communism hasn't been achieved. It's just that there are a bunch of social. So that's what I believe socialism is. Am I right? And then social democracy just, I don't know.
In many countries, the word socialism can mean a whole bunch of things, from public healthcare to abolishing property. And if the word social democracy is even used, it's usually understood to be on the same spectrum as socialism. But I think most Germans will probably cringe at that, since historically we understand those two terms to be different categories. Now I know there are a whole bunch of scientific definitions for those words, but I think conventional wisdom in Germany has it that socialism tries to overcome capitalism, whereas social democracy tries to rein in its destructive powers. Again, you might call this just a matter of degree, but here we perceive those two parties to be on different slots of the political spectrum. One of them with considerably more historical baggage. Just to finish this off, it's actually quite hard for me to see what kinds of factions there are within Die Linke. I mean, obviously there are all sorts of flavors of different doctrinaire socialist beliefs, with most of them belonging to a more settled professional class. But then you do get the occasional nutcase who's still under surveillance of the German intelligence service. So for many people it's kind of a mixed bag. Despite that, there's been a lot of talk recently about including the Linke into the center-left alliance together with the SPD and the Greens. The argument is that we're now 30 years removed from unification and that the old guard has surely given way for a new generation of socialists to emerge who have nothing to do with the old dictatorship. You know, they just want to advocate for better wages and fighting poverty, but that's still up for debate. Die Linke is still associated with these radical economic proposals, as well as a weird pro-Russia stance. So
what my American brain just heard was socialism bad, social democracy sounds pretty reasonable. Is that right? That's just my thoughts.
We'll see. Okay, last one. Controversial.
Die Alternative für Deutschland, AfD.
The AfD was founded in 2013 by a bunch of right-wing conservatives who mainly campaigned on getting rid of the euro and returning to Germany's old national currency. Boring.
The Deutschmark?
Yes. But no, believe it or not, that was actually quite shocking. Our political parties share a large consensus, so they're all broadly for the European Union, they're all broadly for the same economic system, and they all broadly agree that climate change is really bad. And now the AfD came in to, shake things up a bit. Back then in 2013, I thought the AfD might become the sort of mirror image of Die Linke, where they occupy the same kind of spot in our political scene, just on the opposite side. One where they criticize the moderate center from a more ideological, populist perspective. That didn't happen. Instead, what happened was that the AfD was quickly taken over by far-right extremists with overt ties to neo-Nazi organizations with just despicably racist, homophobic, revisionist beliefs. The supposedly conservative side of the party has for the most part been on board with this partnership, although some have left out of protest, including the original founder of the party, which can never be a good sign. Yeah, and you can imagine their positions. They stylize themselves as the sort of fighters against SJW culture, they're hard on immigrants, they are the only rescue for a dying Germany. And that would be the good right, like maybe the conservatives are too mild, maybe we did need a more staunchly right-wing party in parliament. But there's this vicious anti-democratic tendency that permeates the entire party, which is just sad. And yeah, in case you're wondering, the other parties have erected a giant wall between themselves and the AfD, deeming them basically untouchable. Will the AfD actually gain power? Like maybe someday, but not now. Like if the Greens or Die Linke have taught us anything, then that with more moderation, you will gain power in Germany. If you don't moderate, you're out. Dun dun dun.
It seems like every country has its, like, this is what I find interesting, is that although the political spectrum on Europe, and with that horrible diagram I drew, Europe and the US is different in the way I tried to explain, in that, someone in the center right in Europe is going to be much more center or towards the left, and vice versa. But we both have the same crazies on the sides, and that's interesting.
I'm sorry, I didn't exactly end this on a high note, did I? I still hope you had fun, and hopefully you now understand a little bit more about sort of German politics. Just thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed it. Stay civil in the comments, like obviously, don't battle to the death, it's just YouTube. And yeah, love yourself.
Thanks.
Bye.
This seems really wholesome. Really cool video. Again, as I'm continuing to learn more about, well, everything, but government, past few days, or yesterday. Conclusion. Very interesting. I've learned a bit, and I'm going to continue learning. Thank you, Kira, for the recommendation. Hope you guys are all doing well. Love y'all. And I'd appreciate any comments. I'll see you guys next time. Bye, guys. Feel free. Disagree with any and all of what I said in the comments. You can always change my mind. I like to say, you can. I don't think I'm solid in any of my beliefs. Maybe some more than others. But if you disagree with me, I welcome that even more than the agreeable ones. To have some conversation. So I'll see you guys next time. Bye.